Manaz, welcome to NexusTalk.
Thank you.
So this is our very first time meeting each other, and I'm really grateful that I found your art page online on Instagram, and I've been following you for a long time.
Thank you.
And I'm a big fan of your art and your story in general. But for those who are meeting you for the very first time, how would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, I am a French Afghan artist based in San Diego, and I've been pursuing my passion and my art career for the past 10 years. And that's something that's very dear to my heart because it allows me to connect with a lot of different people, and also it allowed me to connect back to myself and my origins. So that's the story that I tell through my art and in my day-to-day life.
And I feel like your identity is an Afghan-French. I feel like, at least for me, it's a rarity to meet an Afghan-French person because you were born in France. Your parents immigrated to France a while back.
Yes.
Can you tell us about your upbringing in France and just being an Afghan out there? How is that experience?
Well, it's very interesting because, as you said, it's very rare to meet. Now maybe more, but back in the days, I was the only Afghan girl in my school. We were the only Afghan family in my hometown. I'm from Normandy. I was born and raised there.
Oh,
Yes.
like Gabrielle and Emily in Paris.
Oh, yes. But yes, I didn't know, when I was very young, I have memories of myself not knowing really where I was from. I mean, I knew that we spoke a different language at home. We smelled differently with the food, and going back to school after having lunch, we had different type of foods and different music at home. We had a big family. It was us and then my uncles and my aunts. So we were very different than the average French person that was around. But I also didn't feel very different. I just thought that I looked different and I was darker because maybe I had grown up on a beach, and I was very young when I had these thoughts. I remember being in first grade and trying to explain. And then this is when my parents were like, "No, we're Afghans, and we come from this country on the map. We're from Central Asia." And it evolved into, I was very comfortable with being Afghan in France, but I was also aware that it was very unique to me. And my sister was much older, so she had already gone through school.
Yeah.
So I was figuring out by myself within my French peers. And to me, it was a great experience. It allowed me to have more introspection into who I was as a young woman. And then it evolved into me moving to the US. So that's another side of myself.
Can you tell us a bit about your parents and their journey of coming to France? What was that like? Or would they ever tell you stories of what their journey looked like? Or were you too young to remember?
I know that was a big part of my upbringing. My parents always spoke about Afghanistan, about Kabul. And I think they didn't think about it. They just told us. We left our country overnight. Russians, I remember the big word, the Russians invaded Kabul and we had to leave. And it was a big decision, but my parents they had just gotten married. That was back in 78, 79. They had just gotten married and they were just starting a life together. They had my sister, and overnight they're like, we can't stay here. We have to leave. And they went to India. From India, they came to France. And that was a big part of them just telling us this is what happened to us. It was their story, so it was normal. And it just stayed with us as far as having this trauma in our family that was part of who we were as Afghans in France.
Yeah. And I feel like going back to your story of your parents moving to France, I want to talk about your multifaceted identity. Because you're American, you've been here for so long, you're Afghan and you're French. Let's talk about languages, because we speak the same 3 languages. I learned French because Canada.
Yeah.
But can you tell us about how that brings up different sides of you? And do you feel like they blend together, or are they just separate and you have to code switch?
Gosh, language is fascinating to me because, as you said, so I speak 3 different languages, and they really represent 3 of my worlds. French was given to me by my education, by the place I was born in. And I was educated in French. I was given so much freedom in the French language. I was pushed to have my own thoughts, to appreciate beauty and art and introspection. And I felt very powerful speaking French as an Afghan girl in France.
Yeah.
And Farsi, I love speaking Farsi to my parents because it connects me to our homeland. I've never been to Afghanistan. I feel very Afghan, but through the language, that was the bridge to the stories,
Yes.
to the food, to family. I have family all over the world, and we're all Afghan-French, Afghan-German, or Afghan-American, so we connect through Farsi. And it's a beautiful language that feels warm to me, but at the same time, all the stories that were told about the war and what happened to my parents and their family, and I have uncles that were in jail, and I have one uncle that was lost in Kabul, and all these stories were told in Farsi. So I'm very aware of the trauma that the language carries also. And English is my adult language. So I decided to move here to California, and I learned English as an adult, and it felt like an excavation. I asked myself deeper questions. I was able to ask myself questions about trauma and ancestral trauma, and just looking deeper, why did I have some anger within me, and why did I have pain that were not healed? And it was all in English because I was a young adult. I was also by myself learning English and being here. So I had the time and space to ask this question, go through therapy or just speaking about it and being confident enough to use these words in English. And there's something to say about learning a new language. You're very cautious and careful about the words that you're using because because you're looking for your words. You're very careful about what you want to say and the meaning of it. Not so much now because it's been such a long time, but still, like I'm still aware that this is not my first language or my second language, and I'm an adult speaking it. But I'm very grateful for it because in my journey as an adult, English helped me to figure out who I was on my own term. I chose English, and I became who I am today through English. And French will always be there in my art. Everything I always journal on the canvas before starting something. I write a lot, and it's always in French. I don't think about it. It just comes out that way. Or with my children, I have 2 boys, and I'm very shocked. I'm very French with them. It's all in French. We sing in French. We read in French. Everything is French, and it's a choice, but it's not a conscious choice. It's just naturally coming out.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack. I love your answer so much. There's like so many light bulbs in my head, so many follow-up questions. But I want to talk about I don't know, French is very artistic, I feel like. So you're lucky that, art is your passion, and French maybe really helps with that part of your life as well. But talking about English, you said you moved to California. Can you tell us about that? And then I'll ask my other question.
I moved to California in my early 20s, and it was not my full choice. I just finished high school, and my sister was already living in the US. She's older than I am, and I was figuring things out. I was starting college in France. I was really excited about it. And somehow my parents made me apply to university here in the US.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't think that my English was strong enough for me to be accepted here. I honestly didn't think it was going to happen. I was just pleasing my parents by taking this test, the TOEFL test, and I passed with high scores. So I don't know if it was just fate because it's all multiple choice. We don't do multiple choice in France, so
really?
No, it's all written tests. So
Wow, that's intense.
That's just the way things are. But I just passed the test, and overnight, I ended up being here. And it's interesting because when I say overnight, it reminds me of my parents' story. It's much more dramatic, and it was different circumstance. But my parents also changed their life overnight by moving to India, then in France, and same thing happened to me here. And it was really hard at first because I was becoming a young adult in France, and France empowers you to to really follow your heart. You have your own thoughts, and you go after it, and you have your passions, and you can. I think the French are big into following your heart and your passion. So that was something I was doing at the time. And overnight I'm here, and everything, I have to question everything. It's like, what am I doing? Do I want to stay here? Started college here, and didn't feel like I could go back because I felt behind in France. All of my friends were finishing, or they were in the middle of college, and I was already here. So I was in limbo. But as painful as it was difficult. But in the same time, it was the biggest gift I could have given myself, to stay here and to question what I really wanted to do and who I wanted to be. And after many years, I found myself as an artist, and I was confident enough I call myself an artist in a closet before coming out in public.
Okay.
Even to my own family, I was like, so now you paint now? And it's like, yes, this is how.
That was a surprise to them.
I mean, they knew, but it was because we grew up with many art classes and art around in France. So we all, like, some people like it more than others. And I've always loved art, and I've always created. But it was not considered something as a set career for my family. Many families have stigma around being an artist. So it's difficult, but I was like, no, this is who I am, and this is what I'm going to do. And I also met the love of my life here, and I had my children here, and it all worked out. And I'm still working on it, but it was a long journey being here in limbo.
Mm-hmm. And talking about moving from France to California by yourself, I feel like what you described about moving, it is very transformative. Maybe all of the overnight experiences that we've always had in our lives, they change you a lot because you're faced with challenges, but that makes you who you are.
Yes.
But tell us about how that looked like. You said you had to restart learning English, and maybe tell us a bit about your college experience as well. But I want to focus on, or emphasize on, what you said about asking yourself questions, relearning English, and maybe asking yourself questions about your identity. How did that look like?
You know, it was not always conscious, but I could tell that I was not comfortable in my own skin. Because in France, growing up, I knew that I was Afghan growing up in France, and I was too Afghan to be French, even though I was born and raised there and I spoke the language without any accent, and I was educated there. But it was always that thing that I was not fully belonging there. I just had that deep down inside of me. And moving to the US, I became the French girl. People heard my accent, and now it's a little bit, it's softer now, but it was very strong initially. And people were like, oh, you're French. But it was like, oh, it's interesting. Now that I'm here, people call me French, but back home they call me Afghan. And also,
layers.
Yeah. And moving to the US, I met a lot of Afghans, and I was very excited because, again, I grew up with zero Afghans around us except my own family. And I thought we were going to connect and speak about the homeland. And I had many questions because I had never been there. But I also didn't feel like I belonged with Afghans in the US. It was, and actually my very close friend in here that I met initially when I moved here is Afghan born in France, which is very rare, but we somehow connected here.
That's awesome.
Yes. And that's why I started asking. I was like, it's interesting. I was like, I finally am in a place when I can meet people who look like me, who have a similar story, and we can talk about Afghanistan and relate, but I couldn't fully relate. And I think I also wasn't ready, and I didn't have the tools to connect with people who had come at a different time or had lived something different, and I didn't know how to communicate with them. But as far as myself, it took a lot of time, and therapy helped. And in therapy, in the sense that just speaking up about how I'm feeling inside, to be able to have it outside of my body and saying it out loud, and slowly healing it, and knowing that it's not unique. It's human nature. We are very fragile, but we're also very strong. And from my perspective, if we feel things hard, it'll allow us to also process things and move forward. And that's what happened to me, I think, in my early 20s and my mid-20s. It was really hard. I thought I was not doing the right thing. And I was wondering, why did I move to a new country by choice where there was no war? I didn't have to leave France.
Because you were comparing it to your parents' experience.
Yes. And I grew up with this fear thinking that something would happen to France and would have to leave because it happened to my own parents.
Yeah. Oh.
They spoke about war and planes coming and the Russian tanks. So I thought it was a normal thing that could happen to me too in France. But obviously it didn't happen, thankfully, but I still left. And I wondered for years, why did I leave France? It's a beautiful country. I miss France daily. I go back at least once or twice a year.
Yeah.
But I think it was meant for me to find myself.
Yeah.
Independently of all the noise.
I love that because I can just see, I mean, you know this better yourself, but I can just see how many blessings and gifts California has brought to you by giving you or unfolding parts of yourself that you didn't know existed, which is beautiful. But all of these things were happening while you were in college. Like, what did your day-to-day life look like? Because you took the TOEFL test.
Yes.
So you initially came for college.
Yes. And I was very lost. I had an idea in France of what I wanted to do. I wanted to study art in France, and I wanted to study literature and then evolve from there either into writing or doing some journalism. And I knew I was very confident to what I wanted to do in France. And when I moved to the US, it was a decision that wasn't fully mine. And I was afraid of being stuck in a journey that wasn't mine. So I studied English and I played it safe at first. I told myself, I'm going to be a teacher. I'm going to be I speak French. I'm going to be a French teacher.
You'd make a great teacher too.
But that was not my calling, and I was not comfortable with it. And I'm someone who's I'm very sensitive, and I grew up that way, and I thought it was a weakness.
Oh.
But actually now I know that it's a strength.
Yeah.
I was very uncomfortable with the idea of doing something that I didn't want to do. So I pursued my studies to become a teacher, and that didn't happen because there were some budget cuts in California, and it was meant to be. So they canceled my teaching program.
Oh.
So I took a year off, and I went back to France. And I didn't last a full year. I lasted a few months, and I told my parents I was going back for my master's, and I did a master here in San Francisco, and I still didn't feel right. I started working in tech, and I love working in tech because it was creative. It was still not what I wanted to do. So I think I kept questioning things, and I kept feeling uncomfortable, and that discomfort I transformed into really going after my dreams.
Yeah.
And there's this quiet voice inside of me that kept pushing me.
Yeah.
And then finally, so I lived in San Francisco, and when I moved to San Diego, I had gotten married. And my husband told me to pursue my dreams. He's like, it's okay, just do it.
That's awesome.
And it was interesting because I had to hear it from someone else. And when he said it, I was like, you're actually right. I should just do it. And I remember starting to paint in our kitchen and on the floors. And I just started my art career then. But it took me a long time to get there, to accept that.
Yeah. A short question. Maybe we shouldn't focus on this that much. But what was your job in tech like? Because you said journalism and writing and teaching and then
it was very different. I was doing project management.
Oh, yes. Okay,
Yes,
that's a popular
in tech,
one.
yes. I was in San Francisco, and that was a field that was very common, and it was great. I did love it. And all of these little experiences taught me a lot about, for instance, like now in art, doing my website, sending newsletters, and that's learned from my tech background.
Yeah.
Teaching, writing. I'm very comfortable writing because of what I've done back home in France or in my early studies. So as much as like in my 20s, I was uncomfortable because I felt like I was not fulfilled with what I was doing, and I was not finishing things fully because it didn't feel like something I wanted to do. But it all taught me what I know now to be able to be a successful and confident artist.
Yeah, that's why I feel like a lot of older people, their advice for people in their 20s is that you should mess around, do something like mess around and learn different skills.
Yeah.
And then maybe in your 30s, you can like build your business, do your art business and do something that feels right to you. Yeah. But can you share more about your art? What kind of art do you do, and how does your day-to-day life look like as an artist?
Yeah. So my art is very messy. It's very abstract. It's very grungy. It has a street art touch to it, but in a very feminine way. That's where it is now. And the way, when I became a professional artist and when I started painting daily, initially, everything that I painted were villages and landscapes of cities on a very abstract background. And I didn't know why it was happening, but everything, my early work, my early body of work was all villages. And after a couple of years, I kept asking myself why it was coming. Because I paint from an instinct. I don't plan. It's a dance between my emotional state, what I'm going through, and the canvas. So I don't think about it, it just comes out and we echo each other.
Yeah.
It's very freeing. So all these villages keep coming up, and looking back after a couple of years, like, oh, I'm looking for a home. This is my quest for home.
Yeah.
And I truly find myself on the canvas because I don't have to explain anything. I could be writing in French. I could have patterns of Afghan carpets, or just the ease and the beautiful light of the San Diego sun all together, and it all blends in together. And I don't have to explain why, or I don't have to speak in any languages. It's just the way the image comes up on the canvas.
That's so cool.
And my latest body of work in the past 5 years, I focused more on my identity as an Afghan. It was my first big show was called L'Afghan, which is the Afghan women.
Yeah.
And that was really difficult because it was so personal.
Right.
And I felt like I didn't have almost the space or the right to tell my story.
Why?
But it's so, when it's so personal, and also calling myself, I am Afghan. I'm full blood Afghan, but not growing up there. I didn't know if I had the space to tell my story as an Afghan woman. But slowly, when I started building the work and talking about it, I realized that it connected me with so many people all around the world who've lived similar things, and they don't have to be Afghans, but we've all had this story of not feeling like we belong somewhere and not having a voice.
That's true.
So that gave me more confidence, and it evolved from there.
I was going to ask where do you draw inspiration, but I feel like you've already answered that question. But yeah, just going back to what does your day-to-day life look like? Because I feel like with creative people, it's never like stable. Like you don't have a schedule, which is so great. But you have more freedom. I don't know how do you feel about that? Because freedom can sometimes feel like too much pressure or just ease for some people.
It's an interesting question because yes, I'm an artist, but I'm a creative, but I'm also a mom. Yes. So that's why there is some structure. Yes. And I have to structure my days. And a typical day for me is dropping off my boys at school, and it's our little French bubble. They go to a French school, and we do that in the morning. And then when I come back, I go straight to a workout of Pilates, which is my Californian side, which I love and I embrace fully. And then once I walk in the studio, it's a space where I can freely create and express myself and give myself the time to analyze the beauty that's around me. How do I want to create? If I want to sit down and just look at my art for hours. And it sounds like a luxury, but as a French woman growing up in France, this is a necessity. I need to be able to have this introspection on what I've created and where do I want to go. Yeah. And I spend most of my days in the studio just being around my paint, my canvases, my body of work, my writing. And I do that, then I walk away and I go back to my children, go pick them up. And I love seeing all these different facets, because then when I cook inspired by Afghan food. I have all the spices. When we sit down at a table, we have French conversations, and they're tiny, they're 6 and 4, but I want them to be able to sit down and talk about themselves, but also listen to me and to listen to what I do, and knowing that they're not the only people, like they're kids, so they're very self-centered, but I want them to hear my story and my husband's story of the day. And we do that, and it's a balance that's forever evolving, but that's my day-to-day as a woman, as an artist in the world.
So Manaz-Jan, I've enjoyed our conversation so much so far. There's so much to unpack, but one by one. So you have 3 homes: Afghanistan, France, and the US. What feels like home to you, or is home a concept that's segregated around these 3 places?
That's a really hard question to answer, because it almost feels like a betrayal San Diego definitely feels like home now. And it's hard to say, and it took me years to accept it.
Yeah.
Because that's not somewhere that I was born in or I didn't grow up here. But San Diego is home because it gives me the space to find my identity and find myself. And Afghanistan is somewhere that I definitely feel a strong pull towards, no matter what. I know that I feel it within me. My blood and my ancestors are from a foreign land, and that's my land, and I will be forever connected to that. Anytime that there's something connected to Afghanistan, I'm automatically pulled in.
Yeah.
And I find that beautiful. And I want my children also to, I speak to my children about Afghanistan, and they know that they're Afghan, and I want to keep that within me and within them and for the next generations.
Yeah.
And France shaped me profoundly. I was educated there, and I was given freedom. I was given a voice. I was taught to be authentic to who I was as a woman, not only as an Afghan woman, but just as a woman. I had my own thoughts, and I was told I could do anything. But I was so young. I was born and raised there, and I was in my early 20s when I moved to the US. But in France, I was too young to activate that power. I know now that I was given all the tools, but I was not using the tools. And mainly being in an Afghan household that was very warm and very loving, and we had amazing family around. But we also had the story of the war that was always within the household, and how we lost people, and we lost our homeland. My parents did. And that was lingering. And I felt more like a spectator to my own life rather than the main character.
I know what you mean.
And that's why when I moved to California, it was painful to go through the growth and the healing. But at the same time, California is not my identity, but it gave me the space to grow my identity.
Wow. Wow. I love that. So do you feel like when you moved to California, you made that switch from being a spectator in your life to being an agent?
Slowly, yes. Like and I think it's part of it is being here away from all the noise of having family around and stories, and there's that, but there's also becoming an adult. I think that with age comes wisdom, and you also have more choices into what do you want to do, which question do you want to ask yourself. Do you really want to go there?
Yeah.
And it was age. I was lucky enough to be here and being away from everything. It was very painful, but it was a big gift, looking back.
Let's talk about your art more. So I know that you said that growing up in France, you used to do art here and there. Everyone was exposed to some sort of art growing up. Maybe it was part of the curriculum.
Yeah.
But where do you get inspiration from aside from your own stories? Like, is there an artist you look up to? Is there a specific style that you feel like speaks to you?
You know, I love abstract art. I love street art, and I also love things that are defying all the rules, where it's you and your art, and you just express using all the tools that you have around.
Yeah.
And the mid-century artists in the US had a big impact on me because they defied all the European rules of the masters. I love the masters, and I do appreciate seeing Monet's work and Van Gogh's work. But seeing people who claim themselves as artists and using house paint or using raw material just to create something from within, something that's very utterly like yours, but it comes out and it's like a creation that's for others to appreciate, and you can bounce back that energy.
Yeah.
I think that's something I'm very drawn to. And oftentimes when I'm back home, I'm very drawn to murals and street art, and I take a lot of photos. It's just grungy and it's raw, and I love that side, because also growing up as an Afghan girl, you have a lot of rules to respect, and you have to present yourself a certain way. And my friend side wasn't that way, but the Afghan, my parents are from Afghanistan, so that was my household. And I like the fact that I can really express myself the way I want to, and not doing it because certain rules told me to do it.
That's beautiful, because your art is just, your story of yourself, the way you're defying, abstract art is defying other traditional art, and you're doing that by choosing your lifestyle yourself.
Yeah.
And being a rebel in a sense. Do you feel like a rebel?
Yes and no. It's I'm still very disciplined, and
Maybe it's about how you define a rebel, because I feel like back home, because the space was so tight for women, anyone who would speak up, it was easy to call someone out and be like, you're an activist, or you're a rebel.
Okay.
And people would do that from, with positive intentions and negative ones. But it's a common word that we've thrown around.
I do love the word.
Yeah.
And I think the part of me that forces me to be outspoken or to show my art is I feel like I have to do it because I was given the freedom at the cost of my parents' story. And when I'm showing my art, or when I'm speaking up about it, when I'm signing a piece, I also keep in mind that I'm an Afghan woman, and other Afghan girls are not given the same freedom. And it's a way for me to say that we are here, Afghan women, we exist, and we're not just headlines. We also create beauty, and we speak for others, and we're here to uplift each other. Yeah. So the brushstrokes are, maybe that's a way of like being an activist by doing something.
I also love that you decided to share your story with us, because I feel like it contributes to the multifaceted identity of all of us Afghans, because I feel like there's a lot of stereotypes about, when you're first moving to a new country, US or Canada, and you say that you're Afghan, and the first words that come to mind are like war, or oppression, or things like that. But there's so much more to us. And I love that you're representing that through your art as well. But speaking about the different generations of Afghans who came out of Afghanistan, how do you feel like you can connect to the Afghan community? Or do you feel like that's still difficult? Because I can picture myself in 20, 30 years. Maybe it would be difficult because I'm outside of the context and I'm not as exposed to my culture as much. But how do we keep grounded in our identity?
It's difficult. I think the reason why it's difficult, and I realized that when I volunteered with the IRC, the International Rescue Committee, and they help resettle Afghans. And I was younger, and I was very excited about connecting with the Afghans, and they were just coming from Afghanistan or Pakistan. And the difference was the trauma. As much as I do have some ancestral trauma or some things that I carry from my parents, but when I met these Afghans who were just coming, they had open wounds. And as much as they look like me and they spoke the same language, when I was looking at them, I could see the pain in their eyes, and it was hard to relate or connect. I could see it. They probably didn't see me as someone that could understand them. And that created a certain gap. But I think that if we as a community would have open conversation, hard conversation, and just listen to each other without judging the pain or the trauma, not like having a hierarchy of like, oh, you came first, you were born in France, or vice versa. Like you were not judging each other and talking about it, because silence is really keeping all these emotions inside, and it's not making us evolve and grow as a community. And I would love for us to move from, and it's easy to say that, but I think ideally if we could move on from being survivors or surviving on a daily basis, but growing as a community, being on community mode. How could we help each other? And I think Afghans also, they're very proud people, and I love that about the culture. But this pride also doesn't allow us to either give help or receive the help. And I wish that we could just meet together and help each other.
Yeah. I love what you said about having that conversation, like difficult conversations, because that's where like we talk about the pride and then we break it down, and that's where the change comes from.
Yeah.
And we're doing that right now. Yeah. I hope it, inspires some people out there and like motivates them to talk about the things that they suffer from, because I feel like we should look at some other communities who are in diaspora outside of their countries and see how they're united, because we're segregated all around the country, all around the world as Afghans. But there's so much beauty in our culture and we have to maintain it.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk more about your parents. What's a memory or a story with your parents that strikes out as one that you remember the most? And also, as you've grown older, how has your understanding of your parents' choices and the entire immigration process evolved as you've moved, and then you understand them better, maybe?
That's a very difficult question for me to answer, because I view my parents as people who sacrificed their youth and their dreams, but at the same time, it wasn't a conscious choice. It was they had to leave Afghanistan if they wanted to build a life, and they left in the best condition possible. They left to India and they went to France, and they were welcomed with open arms. And my dad started studying again and became an engineer. My mom learned French, and my parents had ties. My dad had ties to France prior to what happened to Kabul in Afghanistan. And it's hard to say that, but it was easy, and they got lucky to be able to do that. Not everybody was given the chance to build a new life overnight. And I know that it was really hard for them, but looking at what we know today and what happened to Afghanistan, that was the best thing that could have ever happened. They left in the best circumstances. And I was born much later when they had the quiet and the peace to have another kid, and we were very well assimilated. People welcomed us. It was an easy transition, but I know that it was also very hard for them. But I don't think that they're aware of it. And I wish that they would look inward and heal themselves, because they put their heads down and they worked hard, and they're still working hard, but they're very grateful. They know that they were very lucky. So they've lost a part of themselves. They were young adults when they moved to France. And I know that when they look at us, my sibling and I and my cousins, like, oh, you guys are very French. So they know that. And I know that now as a mom, looking at my children being born in the US, I'm very cautious about them speaking French and knowing our Afghan background. My husband's Iranian, so knowing about Iran. So I want to make sure they have that. So my parents probably also made sure that we had our Afghan side, but you can fully do it when your kid is born in a foreign land. So it was always a dance between the two worlds, and now three worlds. And I wish that they would stop for a second and see how much they have accomplished and try to heal themselves. So.
On the point of healing, I think it would be good to talk about that, because we've had a second wave of immigrants or refugees coming out of Afghanistan, me included. What would you recommend that healing, for people who want to?
Okay.
Not just be a hardworking immigrant, because that leads to burnout, that leads to a lot of negative things that come with that. What would healing look like, even though you hear the news every time from Afghanistan, it's negative and you feel the guilt. There's so much to unpack, but you also have a long way to go of building a life that you want to build. So how do you think that healing is possible for immigrants now, or refugees?
Gosh, I am not an expert, but one thing that really helped me was to talk about it. And going through therapy is amazing. There's such big stigma around therapy, and then speaking up about how we feel. But once you do the work and you label these emotions and what you've gone through, I think the other side of that is just growth and healing. And it's not easy, and it's not given to everybody, but actually now it is more mainstream, so it's more accessible, and it's accepted now more than it used to be. So I think keeping these open conversation and just trying to put yourself first rather than pleasing a community or pleasing family, making sure that we are okay, and then helping the other, or then focusing on the bigger dream. Yeah.
And on that note, what message do you have to other Afghan girls listening, or girls in general, as someone who's gone through a very interesting life journey, and you've discovered yourself and you feel grounded and comfortable in who you are and your identity, what parting words of wisdom would you want to share?
Well, I would like for Afghan women, young women mainly, to be fiercely going after their dreams. And as I was just saying, I think that putting yourself first is very important. Women, men, we need to follow our dreams, our inspiration, and making sure we are okay. Because if we don't do the work on ourselves, if we're not okay with where we are in life, I don't think you can be fully yourself and ready to help the other. And it may sound very selfish, but it starts here first. You have to be okay with your own person, and then start the journey of, if you want to be an amazing activist and help others, then you'll be more confident and you'll be more set going that way forward.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Manaz.
Thank
I
you.
feel like we've covered a lot of interesting topics, but if there's anything else you'd like to share.
No, I'm very honored to be here with you. Oh, I forgot to share one thing. For when your song came out, for the first year, we would listen to your song every day with
Thank
my
you.
sons on their way to school. So that's why they
so
were very
honored.
jealous of not being here today.
Oh, I wish we could make it but travel plans, but
Maybe next time.
I'm really glad that I got the chance to speak to you.
Likewise.
I've really enjoyed listening to your story, and thank you for being that honest and sharing that with us, because I feel like it will help a lot of Afghans out there in their own personal journeys of being a refugee or an immigrant. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Until next episode of NexusTalk, stay informed, stay inspired.